So hey guys, welcome back to New Digs, and we're here on a glorious July day, and we wanted to talk about tools because after our last video where I was struggling with the grass, the pot-bound grass, I realized how important tools are in the garden, and we realized we each have our favorites.
Right, the right tool for the right job can make all the difference.
Yes, yeah, and we're talking today mainly about hand tools. We're not going to get into any like
power tools.
No, which I have never used. So one thing I really recommend, and also just because I like stuff like this, is having some sort of a little carry thing to carry your stuff around in. And this, I think it's called a HOD, H-O-D. It's a very British thing, but I like it for the small hand tools. And then you kind of, if you're like me, you're losing things all over the garden constantly, and this makes sort of a center point where if I'm on my game, I'm putting things back in it as I go so as not to lose things in the garden. So I love having that. And we also, just as we started filming, we're squashing bugs away. And I think an essential thing to have in your toolkit is some bug spray. Especially here, we're in a wooded area, so bugs are, and just having it with all of this stuff means you don't have to interrupt what you're doing and go in and dig it out. So how about we talk about snippy things?
Okay. I think that Melissa and I both, our favorite go-to pruners are our Felcos.
Yep, Felco, F-E-L-C-O. And I believe it's...
Mine's a number 2. What's yours?
I'm not sure. They have different numbers. And
it has to do with grip
grip.
size.
Yep.
And how heavy duty it is. Now, let it be said that these are a bypass pruner, as opposed to, I also have a pair of Florians, which are made here in Connecticut, and these are anvil pruners, and it's just it's a matter of preference. I like my anvils because they also have a ratchet, so it's a little bit easier to grip up with. As my hands are getting a little older, and I get a little more arthritis in my hands, it's kind of, it makes it a little easier to get the job done. But the Felcos feel so good in my hands.
They're heavy duty, and they're also, what's also great is that you can sharpen the blades and you can replace the blades. A good pair of pruners is really essential. And really, if you can try it out in your hand before you purchase, they're not, if you get a good pair like Felcos, they're not inexpensive. You know, it's gonna set you back at least $60, perhaps more, but it's a lifetime investment.
It is, and you'll have it forever, and you want to make sure that it fits your hand ergonomically.
Yep.
And you're going to be putting it into your pocket constantly, so you don't want something that's too bulky that you can't be doing that. I mean, I walk around with my pruners in my back pocket all day, every day. Yeah. When I'm in the garden. So.
And I think too, don't expect these to do everything. I mean, if you're trying to cut branches, don't try to use a handheld thing, because you're just gonna.
That's what this is for.
That's right. That's what this is for.
So anything bigger than what, like a finger's thickness is sort of like your max for something like this.
Yeah. So very small branches.
Yeah, your pinky or smaller. So more like in your perennial garden. Yeah. So when you start needing to do shrubbery. Yeah. You might start to need to do this, and this gives you leverage because it's got the long arms.
Yeah, and then to go to the other end of the spectrum, I love these. It's a little kind of mini pruner. This particular one is made by Dram. These things are super, super sharp, and they hold that edge. We use them all the time at the nursery, and they're great for deadheading. They're great for houseplants. They're lightweight. And they're my favorite tool.
One at last cutting tool is something like this. Now,
is that loppers? We call that loppers.
I call these hedge pruners.
Hedge pruners, okay.
And these are essential if you're doing something like shaping a shrub. Like if you've got a boxwood hedge or any kind of a hedge that you want to have clean lines, straight sides, or even something that you're shaping into a topiary or a ball or anything. These are really helpful. You don't want to go through thick branches with this, but this is perfect for going through yew and boxwood and things like that that have fine leaves that you need to give a haircut once or twice a year.
In addition, if you watched our last video, you met my delightful saw, which needs to be, well, it needs to be cleaned up
a little bit.
Yeah, but in any case, this thing is great for small branches. And this isn't, you know, for normal gardeners, beginning gardeners, this isn't necessarily something you would need, but it turned out we did need it last week when I was trying to get that
Right.
grass out of the pot. So something
So
nice to have.
I would call these kind of things
Yep.
absolutely essential.
I
Next,
would call this absolutely essential.
yes,
too.
I would say all
Yeah.
the hand pruners.
Yep.
Find the one that's right for you,
Yep.
essential. And then next level is sort of the other kinds of pruners.
Yeah. Yeah.
And-
So let's talk about cultivators.
okay.
These things I find absolutely essential because they're mainly for weeding, and you can see some of them have a long handle so that you can get back into areas in the perennial bed especially that are a little bit further away, or the vegetable garden, and it's just what it looks like. You're basically just stirring up the weeds so that you can then pull them out by hand. I think these are essential, and this one is glorious.
This is, you got to find what feels right to your hand and your reach and everything. I found this one a couple years ago, and this is nice because also it's sort of like a mini rake.
I love that.
So in my vegetable bed, I can kind of use it to kind of level things off.
Yeah, that's right.
When a big rake is a little too much, I can kind of
Yeah.
get between my veg feels good in my hand. So
Yeah, and notice how this one has, hers, all of the tines are in a row, so it's good for smoothing. Mine has more of a digging function, so it's going to be getting those roots out. I think that for Christmas, you might want to remember
okay.
this for myself.
Okay.
Um,
Let's talk about trowels.
okay. Okay. If there's
Everybody
one
needs a trowel.
thing you need to have besides the pruners, it's probably you need this even more, and it's just a trowel. Trowel, and you probably need a couple of these because you're going to lose them. This is a couple of different ones I have. This has like an ergonomic thing, which is nice if you're doing a lot of planting. The main thing, this one is more heavy duty. You can get an expensive trowel. They don't have to cost a fortune, but just know that you may be going through more of them. So again, just find one that feels good in your hand.
And they make some that are more narrow and
Yes.
long.
For
those
bulb
are,
planting.
Those are very useful for bulbs and things you need to get a small
Deep.
thing down deep.
Yep.
I've lost mine. This is sort of a hybrid trowel. I don't know what you would call it, but this is, again, another one of my new favorite tools of the past couple of years because it gives me reach.
Yeah.
But I use it sort of like I use my trowel, but it kind of allows me to kind of reach over and dig into the soil. And
It's got a jabby. I like the pointy jabby thing too.
It's fairly sharp too.
Yeah.
So I can sort of pull a straight line in my vegetables.
That's
to
true. You
do
could plant
seed.
seeds.
But I could also dig a small hole the same way I would with a trowel. So
It looks too like if you needed to dig out a sort of a deeper root, like it could be something that you could
Yes.
stab in if you didn't happen to have a long handled tool handy.
exactly.
You could get
this
that started.
is sort of a good in between
Yeah.
a long handled tool and something that you're going to have in your back pocket all the time.
Right.
But I do like this, and I think this would also be useful in the zombie apocalypse.
I completely agree. Along with my my fork, Vlad the Impale. As
Yes.
long as we're talking about now, these are short-handled tools,
Mhm.
obviously, but you also will need a couple of long-handled tools. I think this thing. This is a hoe, and it can kind of accomplish the same things that tool that Jill was just showing does. You see, it has the spiky end, and then it has the draggy end. And because this has the long handle, you can get more leverage. So this would be something you could use to start digging a stump out, or something that's kind of deeply rooted. But it's also just good for weeding.
This is my favorite hoe,
Yeah.
and it's a stirrup hoe.
Yeah.
And this one is made for more. You kind of cut along the surface of the soil, so it's more for cut.
Is it sharp?
It's
It's got an edge.
It's
a little bit.
sharpish. So
Okay.
what it does is it's for cutting the tops off of annual weeds that are between your delicate. Like, you don't want to get down deep into the roots because you've got your plants already in place.
The things you want there, and then you've got weeds coming up in rows between.
Right, and
so,
this will sort of behead the weeds between your plants and slow them down. And once their heads are gone, depending on what the weed is, hopefully they won't come back. But
that's nice.
it is nice, especially further into the season, once you have a lot of established
Yeah.
things in your vegetables and your perennials, and you don't want to be like digging
digging, you know, one at a time.
deeply. You don't want to dig deeply.
Yeah, that's great.
So that's my hoe.
Okay.
Now, I covet your little
Well, I
shovels
have
that
two. I have a whole bunch of shovels. I have flat bottomed ones, but I love these, and I think of them as sort of my like little girly shovels because they have a smaller what would you call it, anvil, the end, and I can get into small spaces. And you notice there are two separate lengths here. This one is going to give me more leverage, but this one has the handle on it. So if I really need to dig down, I love having the handle that I can use to, you know, just sort of create a larger hole. But having the small head on the shovel, I think is a nice thing.
Right, and you know, obviously,
Yeah.
mine is much bigger, but it's important to have your shovel sized correctly to the person that's using it. There's an actual real ergonomic trick
Yeah.
to having the right shovel. So let's show you that.
Yeah, I don't.
So this is my shovel and it fits me perfectly, and I've had it for years. So when you're buying a shovel, you want to get it sized to you properly, and it has to do with the size, the length of the handle, and the angle of the shovel itself. Melissa has a shovel we showed you that has a much smaller head, but it still fits her properly because of the length of the handle and the way it's angled. So the way you know whether or not a shovel fits you is if you're holding it with the spade part of it straight up and down, you'd be holding it as sort of a comfortable arm length out, so you could step on the back of it and it would go neatly down into the ground when you put your weight onto it. Now, here's an example of a shovel that's a little too big for me. If I was to put it so the blade was going straight up and down and stepping on it, I don't have a good balance. This is putting me all off balance. So this is not ergonomically made for me. This is made for somebody who's probably about 6 inches taller than me. Okay, the last thing that we need to talk about are forks.
Yeah.
And there's two different kinds of forks that we need to talk about. And this is Vlad the Impaler. This is
Aptly
Melissa's.
named. I named him.
This is Melissa's hay fork that she was using improperly one day and stabbed herself. But
In the foot.
Yes, but this is normally meant for, has long sharp tines, and it's meant for digging into hay or mulch.
Compost. You could turn your compost.
For moving large amounts of loose fibrous material quickly, but this isn't really something you should be using in the actual garden. This is a garden fork.
I think the roosters are a little unnerved by all the sharp forking
Yes,
tools.
but a garden fork is really useful for lifting plants and dividing.
Yeah.
My favorite method of dividing plants is to have two forks that you put in back to back, and then you help separate the plant that you've already lifted and you need to divide into two. So
Daylilies are a famous example of that.
right, so this is a really useful tool to have, and it'll also, I think that it kind of is easier on the roots sometimes when you're lifting a plant than shoveling around
And chopping.
And you might end up sating more roots if you're sort of more tearing a little bit rather than cutting the roots with a shovel.
I almost always use this when I'm digging something up.
Do you?
Instead of I think that's exactly right. You can kind of go around it and make a perforation around a plant and then gently, you know, pry it out instead of hacking down through and knowing that you're cutting off some roots.
Right.
I also use it a lot early in the spring. For example, just to turn over a raised bed. The soil has been compacted through the winter, so I just get in there with the fork to loosen it. And I use this a lot.
Yeah, I think everybody just needs to find the tools that fit their needs, fit in their hand and feel nice, and eventually become like an extension of your arm, and they're very
And you'll notice too that a lot of people who are avid gardeners, they are very protective, especially of their pruners, and they're hesitant to loan them to somebody else because it becomes as you said, it's just such a part of the way that you garden.
Right.
And just a couple of last little items that I have in here. I usually, in my carrier, I usually have some string in case I need to, tie something up quickly or stake something. I usually have, even though I don't wear them very often, and my nails will attest to that, but I do think it's good to have a pair of gardening gloves, especially if you're weeding and you may be near some poison ivy or something like that. I think it's just a good idea. And then finally, I have this little weeder. This is great for things like dandelions or plantains.
You need to get down
straight
deep.
down, deep taproot. So
Yeah.
I just usually have this in there in case I need it for some sort of deep-rooted weed. So this is, it's a fair number of things, but as we said, the tools you really need, I'd say, is a good spade, shovel, one good fork, good pair of pruners or two, a cultivator.
And you just add to your collection slowly over the years, and
Exactly.
you'll figure out what works for you.
So hope this was helpful. It was really fun to kind of gather up our favorites and share a little bit about how to use them.
So if you liked, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on New Digs.
Bye.